Our next session is called Writing Satire, and we have Moni Mohsin and Milan Vohra with us. Moni was born and raised in Lahore, Pakistan. She started her writing career at the Friday Times, Pakistan, Pakistan's first independent weekly, where she served as the features editor. She is the author of 2 novels, the prize-winning The End of Innocence and Duty Free. Her best-selling collection of satirical columns, The Diary of a Social Butterfly and Return of the Butterfly, are based on her long-running column for Friday Times. Thanks for joining us, Moni.
Thank
We
you.
We also have with us Milan Vohra, who is best known as India's first Mills and Boon author. Her latest work, Head Over Heels, is about forgiveness, acceptance, and fighting your inner demons to find love. She's a TEDx speaker, an award-winning advertising professional, and she writes for publications such as the Huffington Post, The Hindu, and Cosmopolitan. Thank you for joining us, Milan.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
And Moni, first of all, I must say thanks God for small messes. Allah ka rahm hai that you could overcome all these obstacles and come here and join us today.
Thank you. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, and I'm so pleased that I could come to Bangalore, even if it's only in my dreams and only on the computer. But it is lovely to interact with all of you.
Thank you so much. And we've heard the introduction, but what you often read and you should know is that Moni's been called one of the wittiest writers in the subcontinent. She's been compared with Jane Austen. She's been compared with Helen Fielding, of Bridget Diary fame. So my first question to you is, Moni, is there a lot of pressure on you to be funny in real life? What happens when you go out?
Milan, sometimes it happens. Sometimes I remember when I was in Mumbai attending a literary festival once, there was a lady who kept sending me messages saying, I so want to meet you. I've read all your books. Milna aapse, please na, mujhe mile sahi. So I said, okay, fine, come to my hotel. So she came and we had tea and she sat down opposite me and we were chatting, and halfway through she put her cup down and said, mind na karein, but aap funny nahi hai. And I was so taken aback by her candor as well. I don't know what she expected of me, but yeah, I guess I'm not cracking jokes when people meet me so much. But apologies for.
Yeah, they expect you to perform every time you go out somewhere.
I guess.
The act. So I had time to go through a couple of interviews, and I think the whole thing began with as we heard, you were writing for the Friday Times, but that journey from writing about yourself in the column to how Butterfly was born. There's this very interesting anecdote that you had. You said that you overheard a conversation. Would you like to share that?
Yeah. So I was writing this column called By the Way, which was about my life as a young working woman in Pakistan and all that it entailed. And this is, back in the 90s, much before Facebook, much before Instagram, before people thought that there was such a thing as privacy. And I used to sort of write about my own life every week. And I got tired of it, and my friends got tired of it and said, "Sara waqt hamare bare mein likhti ho, humko nahi acha lagta. Apne bare mein bhi likhti rehti ho. Write about something different. It's so boring." So I said to my editor that I must write. I have to stop writing this column. And he said to me, "Look, you already have a readership, and you have to write something different. You can write something different, but you have to keep writing, and write about women's issues. Write in a light-hearted sort of way, but you have to continue a column." So I kept thinking, how can I do a column which is different, but at the same time is about society and social concerns, etc. Until I went to, and which is different to what I'm doing now. So I went to a lunch party in Lahore, and it was outside in the winter, and it was cold, and there was a buffet. And I was waiting my turn to go and serve myself. And there were these 2 ladies talking ahead of me. And one of them was sort of slightly short and a bit plump. And she was wearing a chatouche, a huge, big, fat chatouche. And she was wearing diamonds in her ears the size of ice cubes. And there was another...
Chatouche is allowed over there, right? I think it's been banned in a lot of places.
Yes, chatouche is still, as they say in Pakistan, yahan pe bhi succinct nahi hua. But anyway, so there we were. And there was another lady talking to her who was of slightly sort of uncertain age, but she had long blow dried hair, and she was wearing the chiffon sari even though it was very cold. And the Shatush lady said to the chiffon lady कि मेरे पास पता है पहले भी 2-3 थे, पर मैंने सोचा ये 7 yarder है तो मैं ये ले लूं ना, और डबल कलर है, और तुम्हारे पास है शतूश? So the lady sort of flicked back her hair, says नहीं darling मैं तो shawls नहीं पहनती, वो बड़ा maids वाला effect आ जाता है ना. And then she flicked her hair back and she went off. And I thought, this is the voice, these are the people, these are the concerns. And that's how Butterfly was born.
I
And
think
the column was
before
born.
we do anything else, Moni, Butterfly is so loved that let's just kick off the session with a little refresher for everybody, who fell in love with Butterfly. Could you just read any piece that you want from?
Okay, so
Second.
here's a piece that I wrote very recently, and this one is about her being, now that the second spite, as she calls it, COVID ki second spite bhi ab aa gayi hai na. It's in Lahore, and Janu, her husband, is very particular, and he insists that she has to stay home and she can't attend her coffee parties and her lunch parties and all her kitty parties. So she's stuck, as she says, I'm stuck up at home only. So she's stuck up at home and she's trying to entertain herself. So this is what she's doing these days. So, since Janu's placed me under house arrest for this COVID ki second spite, I've been exhuming myself by watching the latest season of The Crown. Why Princess Diana wala baba? Between you, me, and the four walls, the earlier seasons were a little bit bored, na? All that dry, dusty stuff about history. I mean, who cares? Who even remembers? The only person who remembers is that Buddhi Roo Janu, my husband. वो तो 100-year-old newspaper को भी fascinating समझते हैं ना. वैसे to be honest, वैसे even in the old ones, in the old season, I enjoyed their clothes very much. Margaret's in particular, and all that jewelry and their big houses and those 4-coaster beds that they had, and all those knocker chakras wearing suit and tie and everything. Imagine. Anyway, so discovered that Prince Philip's mother was a nun. Can you imagine? I mean, she could have taught me at the Lahore Convent of Jesus and Mary, except that she's a bit elderly. She would probably have taught mummy, not me. I thought nuns couldn't get married and have children, but she had Prince Philip. वो कैसे किया उन्होंने? Must ask Janu. Or maybe not, he'll give me 2-hour lecture. Anyways, this season was tabai. Honestly, Pichari Diana ko dekh ke, I felt so bad, you don't even ask. That Buddha Turkey husband of hers, Charles, not even good looking from anywhere, Judgy Sadial Susral, that Astin ka Saap, Camilla, ऊपर से being so friendly and all, और पीछे से, some backstabber जैसे. वैसे it also reminded me so much of marriages here also, no? Young, innocent girl married into big Khata Pita family, all the time were looking down at her and making her remember her aukat, and husband cold and boring and ignoring, and also carrying on with that Sadial Saap, Camilla. Naturally, then that poor innocent young girl is going to have affairs with other people. Or kya kare, I mean, I wish Diana hadn't chosen her bodyguard, aakhir, just between you, me, and four walls, security wala tha, and she was princess, But chalo, don't tell Kulchu I said this, my teenage son, he's so politically correct, goes up the walls when I say things like that. Anyway, I was saying to Janu ki fit a move of the royal family, for treating Bichari Marhuma Diana like this. And he said that, this is fiction, this is TV program. How do we know what went on in those four walls? How do we know what they were saying? It's all made up. I said, okay, Baba, take bets from me only. If it was made up, then you tell me that Diana will not die in the final season in that tunnel, and that she will marry that Pakistani doctor and live happily ever after in a koti in model town with his family. Uspe he became chup. Nash, डरपोक जैसा. There we have it.
Now tell me, between you and me and the four walls, Moni, how often does your humor come too close for comfort? You've got Janu, Kulchu, or you're constantly writing about Janu as this Zinda Lash who's so lazy, who's hanging around the house. I mean, do you have relatives coming and telling you ऐसे नहीं बात करते जानू के बारे में?
No, nobody. I started writing this column before I was married, so they know that Janu is a figment of my imagination. So
You have
that kind of protects me. So I'm a little bit I'm okay on that front.
but
And my
but
own Janu has never said anything to me about this. My
But
own Janu lets me write and
does your satire strike home? I mean, this whole thing of, you're writing about people, who can probably see something of themselves in it. So, I mean, this whole ability to laugh at yourself, do the rich and influential have it?
the funny thing is, Milan, between you, me, and the four worlds, nobody sees themselves in it. Nobody looks at this and says, okay, this is me. They all look and say, वो तुमने उसके ऊपर बड़ा अच्छा किया है, मुझे पता है तुमने इसको किसके ऊपर सेट किया है, मुझे पता है. Nobody actually, in the many years that I've been writing Butterfly, I have been approached, I think about 3 or 4 times in my whole life by people saying to me, that this reminds me of ourselves, or that I look at this and I see a mirror being held up to me. Mostly people think I'm writing about somebody else.
But I find that quite an amazing thing, because on one hand, people see the person you're writing about, and yet it's kind in a way, right? It's where they've somehow found space in it to exclude themselves from it.
I think,
juggling all.
because the butterfly's first object of ridicule is herself, right? She's sending herself up all the time. And I think that lowers I would say the offense giving level. If you're laughing at yourself first of all, as I am in this book, then and I send myself up all the time, then it becomes easier for other people to see it as well, and to read it without taking offense.
Do you see butterfly as something that is, I mean, we when we read these books in India, we could relate with it. You could see a lot of parallels. The characters were people. I've seen a lot of butterflies. Have you also had Western readers who have been able to identify with butterfly? Is it something which is universal, or is it something that you are writing very consciously for readers in the region?
The language is particular to Pakistan and to India, I think. The way we speak, the cadences, the mix of Urdu and English, or Hindi and English. But I have published Duty Free, as Tenterhooks is known in the West. And there, when I gave it to my agent and I said to him, have a look at this. Do you think it will pass? And he read it. And he said to me that, this character, the butterfly, is a universal character. She's a spoiled, rich, cloistered, privileged woman, very social, and people like her are found all over the world. So you will find butterflies like her in Moscow, you will find butterflies like her in Lima, you will find butterflies like her in Jakarta, you will find butterflies like her in Riyadh, you will find butterflies like her in Nigeria. Wherever there is great inequality and injustice, there you will find butterflies. And I suppose the biggest butterfly of all was Marie Antoinette, right?
Right. Let them have tea.
Yes, yes.
This whole thing of living in a bubble is entitled privileged kind of bubble. I guess that's the universal kind of relatability of butterfly then.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But I just wonder, because I think what you've done really well, Moni, is when you even when you've used the way butterfly speaks, it's not just saying I want to get the phonetics of it onto paper, because you're using humor in the written word, and you don't have the luxury of being able to enunciate it for your reader, but when you put it, I find it very interesting that you always added another layer. It's like saying bums are dropping over Lahore, bums as in BUMS, and I'm saying bums, I sit up at night saying bums are dropping over Lahore, and you keep doing that. There's a surprise all the time with not just getting the phonetics, but there's another level of humor that you get.
Yeah, I have to say, my inspiration, my fellow Lahoris, and also from all over Pakistan, and here in London as well, I have lots of Indian friends, and I listen to them all the time. I have a kind of a recorder which is always recording in my brain. So I remember I went to a lunch given by an Indian friend in London, and there was a long table laid out. She had a lovely garden, and there was a long table laid out, and the kids were playing in the garden, and lunch had been served. And so she kept calling her child to come and eat, come and have lunch. And she said, "Anjali, Anjali, come, Anjali, come, lunch is ready. Anjali, come." And Anjali kept ignoring her and finally said, "Anjali, lunch is put." And so Anjali came in, and then she had her lunch. So those things, we speak like that, and that's my great inspiration. I don't make up so much as I copy.
But it's still, it's like, I think writing humor is, I attempted it in one of my books in TikTok to 30, and I said that writing humor is one of the toughest genres to do, and you're doing satire, which is that you have a greater message that you want, to be communicated through the humor. Where so my question is, how do you know where you're pitching it? I mean, are you how do you know if the reader is going to get it? Do you want to be leading by the nose? How do you get a sense of that, Moni?
um, Sometimes, Milan, writing satire is difficult because your audience sometimes doesn't get it, your reader doesn't get it. Because I remember I was at school once and we read Animal Farm, and one of my fellow students turned to me and she said, "It was such a lovely animal book. I don't know what people are going on about, about it having messages." And I remember that conversation because it kind of struck with me that it can actually work on several levels. And George Orwell said that you can read Animal Farm as an animal fable if you want, or you can read it as a satire, or you can read it as social commentary. And in my case, I think that my readers are alerted ahead by the language, by the misspelling, by the mixed, the metaphors, the malapropisms. So they know that this is not serious writing. But sometimes I remember that a journalist, a very famous journalist from Pakistan, once wrote a piece on Malala and how her earwax was used to find her somewhere in the world or whatever. And that was taken as serious reporting by people. They didn't realize it was a satirical column. But in
Almost
Butterfly,
the danger of being taken literally, right? I mean, I think because you're using the written word, so
yeah.
sarcasm is wasted completely, unless you spelled it out.
Diary of a Social Butterfly began as a newspaper column, as your announcer said in the beginning. So it appeared in the Friday Times. It appeared on the back page of the Friday Times, which was a serious newspaper, but the back page was known to be sort of a humorous take on life. And it was, so whatever column that appeared there was known to be a satirical column, made up column. So Butterfly, people knew even before the books arrived that this was actually satire. So I was helped that way. It had a life before the books came on. It had a life as a satirical column before the books became known. And I believe it was also published in an Indian newspaper. I think it was the Express.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
But you also had the challenge of then taking Butterfly into Tender Hooks, where then you were writing it as a novel. So what happened with you there in the journey? From writing a piece to saying I need to also have the whole character arc, and what was.
Yeah. Actually, it was my editor Chiki Sarkar in India who suggested that to me. She said, "Why don't you write a novel based on these characters?" And I must say that it was not very difficult. It's the novel that has taken me the least amount of time because I already had the characters. I already knew the setting. I already knew the world. I didn't have to imagine a whole world. I knew the world they operated in. I knew the language. I knew the concerns of these people. And so it just became a question of finding a story. And as you know that characters drive their own story. So I already had junkers, and this search for a wife, etc. in the columns. So I just picked that up and I developed the story from there.
So let me ask you a question, which I thought was curious, because there's been a lot of books that I read recently that have had writing about, say India, but written by authors who are not living in the country. And you're writing as well about, Pakistan and, writing it out of London. This whole thing of being the outsider in that sense, you're writing with that perspective. There's so many aspects to it. So I just, we'll speak about a few of them. One is, of course, has it given you greater freedom? Let's start with that.
Distance certainly gives you a greater perspective. You can see more clearly when you're not within a situation. When you place yourself at a remove from it, then you can see it more clearly. So that is one thing. The other thing is that it emboldens you as well. If you're living in an environment where there is freedom of speech, it's taken for granted. It permeates your own consciousness as well, and you write in with that sort of stance. I also write. I know that I write Butterfly quite freely from London, but Butterfly is not as it does not sort of name names and go for people like that. But yeah, it does embolden you. Maybe absence makes the heart grow stronger in some ways, and it makes you see things more clearly. It is more, in some ways, it allows you to put things in context more easily sometimes, because the situation is not evolving day by day with you living in it.
But tell me, it's very curious the way you've always juxtaposed an incident that's happened and then looked at it from Butterfly's perspective. So there is clearly, I mean, you are bringing in, the insider sort of view also. I mean, not just Butterfly's character, but in terms of what are the things that are concerning her, the character. I remember there was a piece that was talking about, let's all be vigilant and rise up against, the terror threat. There are terrorists around. And then you have that piece was about Butterfly and her friend Mallu, who car, and then they stopped to buy fruit, I think, and that whole, how do you bring that zoomed in perspective and the zoomed out perspective for Butterfly all the time, writing as you are from outside the country?
So Milan, here I have to make a very important confession, which is that I am Butterfly. So I'm an outsider because I'm sitting outside of Lahore, but I'm an insider because I was born into that class. I understand how it operates. I have lived within it. I understand the concerns. I understand this constant worry about how am I appearing. Everybody's constantly worried about मैं कैसी लग रही हूँ, लोग क्या कहेंगे. Those are the kind of things that people live with in the subcontinent all the time. And women in particular are very conscious in the way they appear, not just because they are conscious of their, in a sense of vanity, but because of the male gaze. They are, they're constantly watching themselves as well. So I bring all of that into the Butterfly, and because I understand how society operates, and I understand how women feel, and I understand how this particular class of people live and behave and think, I can access her interiority as well. And I can see her from the outside too. For that reason,
with your publishers, Moni, then when you're writing, are you also looking at? I think that a lot of writing that we see that that is about the subcontinent coming from outside, there seems to be this need to explain too much. Explain caste, explain all sorts of aspects of things that should not be explained from the white perspective. I mean, it seems to be coming from a white perspective too often. And
I feel that very much.
Writing, then you're again saying that there is this whole need constantly, to contextualize it for for that Western reader? I mean, is that
Yeah.
something that you've struggled with, Moni?
Yes, I do, Milan. I have to say that, in the West, there is a great appetite for books for books from the subcontinent, actually books by non-white writers that explain their whole society, their culture, their history, their thinking, to white audiences. So our purpose in life, I think, is as writers is different to that of if you want to be published in the West, is different to that of Western writers. So for example, if you're writing from the subcontinent, the kind of books that they wanted to see for a very long time were all about, from Pakistan certainly, were all about terrorism. They're fighting this war on terror, so they want to know all about that. And the weird thing was that most of the writers who were getting published in the West were all sort of liberal writers who had no idea of what a terrorist cell looked like, or how people become radicalized, or what happens to them, or what training have. It was all a huge sort of feat of imagination, but that is what we had to do to get published in the West. I mean, as you said, that you and if you're writing about India, we have to write about caste, you have to write about violence, you have to write about slums, you have to write about we can't
And
I
exotic.
remember.
You're right.
Yeah. And we just have to educate Western audiences, and our experiences are not considered universal experiences. I remember that right at the beginning of this year, I think in January or February sometime, I was having lunch with a British editor, a white editor. And this was just before the Black Lives Movement, I say well before Black Lives Movement broke out in America, and had reverberations throughout the world. We were having lunch, and she said to me, nobody's actually really interested in humor from the subcontinent. Our readers want deep, dark subjects engaged with in a very profound level, from the subcontinent. That is what they want. So, our humor is not acceptable. If you want to write science fiction and you're a Desi author, they're not really interested in that. If you want to write a detective novel, then that too must cover a whole lot of, it must be caste based, and it must be set in a slum, or it must be set, there must be violence towards women. Our women always have to be shown to be oppressed. So those kind of things I find very difficult.
Yeah.
And I
You
remember,
also
and
have to carry all of it. All of that message needs to come onto you.
yes, and you carry this responsibility of explaining your whole society to them, whereas they can write anything they want, and they can get published. They can write a historical romance if they want. They can write sci-fi if they want. They can write fantasy if they want. They can write horror if they want. But we have to write these books which educate them. That is our responsibility.
So tell me, I'm going to get away from it and talk about more about satire, because we'll talk about that. I think you've got a new book coming up, and we're going to give people a taste of that very soon. But satire, by its very nature, is political. It needs to be able to hold something up, and be able to look at it with that lens. So, do you think it's a must, or can satire not be political also? The
So
politics
satire
of
can also be
yeah,
social satire, right?
right.
But I would argue, Milan, that everything is political in life, whether it's politics with a capital P, in which case you're talking about elections and party politics, and issues like, um, like, you know, the formation of the electorate, etc. But in fact, I think everything is political with a small p. So, for
I
example,
don't mean political as in the political, but yeah, the politics of anything. Being to be able
yeah.
to
So even if you talk
that,
about, even
yeah,
if you talk about the environment, if you talk about pollution, if you talk about if you talk about women's rights, all of these things are political at the end of the day. And even in your book, for example, a TikTok, we're 30, you're talking about people who are not, a woman who's not married at the age of 30. Now, that's a very political thing if you actually look at it, because the fact that a woman is not married at the age of 30 shows that she has not done what is expected of her, in that she has not hitched herself legally to a man and born his children, and so that property can be passed legally and in an orderly fashion from one generation to the other.
Yes, so there is
And that is
that kind of pressure, that even if you say that you are with a progressive in a progressive home and family and environment, there is still that conditioning that puts the pressure on women, and there is the politics of that as well.
yeah. And if she doesn't have a child, then there's the politics of that as well, that what is the use of a woman if she can't reproduce, and because women themselves have so little worth in our society, that she cannot produce anything of worth if it's not a child. What is her use then? So all of these kind of issues are political at the end of the day. So I would argue that everything is political. But yes, you can have a political satire, like for example, Animal Farm is, which is based, which is taking aim at totalitarianism and authoritarianism very, very clearly. Or you can have a satire like Nancy Mitford's Pursuit of Love, which is about the lives and concerns of a leisured elite.
Moni, you said somewhere, I read in an interview that you said, all of satire involves betrayal. Would you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I just mentioned Nancy Mitford. Nancy Mitford belonged to a very wealthy aristocratic family. And she wrote about her family. She wrote about her class. She wrote about her parents' friends. She wrote a lot about her father. And it was an exposure of the inanities and the superficiality of people there. But it was done, I like to think, with quite a lot of affection and humor and compassion as well. But in order to write satire successfully, you have to expose. You have to expose either a taboo. You have to touch something which is slightly uncomfortable. It could be your relationship with your parents. It could be your relationship with your society. It could be your friends that you're writing about. But you have to expose either hypocrisy or an injustice or something. And often a writer does, they say, write what you know. So the things that you know, in this case, are probably your first victims, or are your family and your friends and your circle. So that is, in that way, you betray people. But you don't have to name them, you don't have to make them. And most writers actually produce sort of composite characters, so people are not so easily recognizable. You can't really say. So in my case, for example, nobody has said to me, aapne mere pe likhi hai ye kitab, mujhe pata hai. I am the butterfly.
I think you also said, I remember reading somewhere, or this was in our conversation before this, where you said satire is also about stupidity. So I think there is a level of you said you need to do it without being cruel, right? So I think
I try and not be cruel, but sometimes the most successful satire is very, very cruel. One of my most favorite books is actually such a cold-hearted and such a devastating book. It's called A Handful of Dust, and a very small book, very short book by Evelyn Waugh, in which there's no affection, no compassion at all. It's deadly, and it kind of strikes fear in your heart when you read it. But a very successful book in what it sets out to achieve.
Moni, a lot of people, often confuse satire with other forms of humor, and we know that satire may use all the other forms. But just for clarity, I'm going to do a quick thing with you and say, okay, so tell me, how is satire different from sarcasm? I'm going to just run through a couple of different forms, and if you have answers, let's do it.
Also, so sarcasm is just a cheap shot, Sarcasm is just a cheap shot. It doesn't require any sort of imaginative feat behind it. It's just a quick, sharp dart at somebody, and it's quite often low.
What about parody?
Parody is a take on either a book or a film or something like that. It's not about, so it takes as its departure point a piece of work that is already in existence, and it makes fun of that particular work in that same language. So like Jane Austen and the Zombies takes fun at Pride and Prejudice and Zombies takes a poke at Pride and Prejudice in the same language, etc. Satire is about
I didn't prejudice and butterfly also. Sorry. Bride. Yeah. Okay. I think that, we may be running short on time. Are we good? Um, so I think that, before we run out of time completely, we should talk about the new book that you're doing, and how it's different from everything that you've done so far, because, that is also satire, but the balance seems to be different, right? And I must
yeah.
give everybody a first look, this is,
Milan, I haven't seen it either.
seriously? Shall I hide it through it?
No, I've seen the cover. I've seen the cover on but I haven't held it like you have. It hasn't yet arrived to my copy. I'm so jealous.
Oh, beautiful. Here it is.
Thank you. Oh,
Gorgeous. It's a beautifully produced book.
thank you. It's like giving birth, isn't it, Milan? You're a writer. You know that feeling, don't you?
Yeah.
And when you hold it in your hands, and it doesn't cry and it doesn't burp.
But Moni, you must tell the viewers that the book is up and what it's about.
Yes. So
order, right?
the book comes out on the 21st of December, and it's called The Impeccable Integrity of Ruby R. Ruby R is a young woman who's idealistic and who is a feminist and who is independent, and she's studying in London, and she goes to a lecture given by a Pakistani rising young political star, not young, a rising political star who is not directly from politics. He used to be an actor, and then he had a television serial, etc. And she falls under his spell. He's so convincing, he's inspiring, he's charismatic. And so she dumps her degree and she goes off to join him and run his campaign in Pakistan as a social media manager. And so the book is about, it's a kind of a racy mix of love and politics with a capital P, because she is trying to forefront his political struggle and his political campaign. And it's also about social media and how it impacts our lives, and our politics in particular. It's about gender relations. It's about power and privilege and class, like a lot of my writing is, and how the quest for power and privilege impacts our choices, and what kind of consequences those have.
I'm very worried about who we are at the point
I'm
at right now. I'm so worried about it.
Have you read this book, Milan, yet?
I'm about midway, and of course, I like the way you got Saif's character. He's like he's got shades of Amitabh Bachchan, he's got shades of Shah Rukh Khan, he's got shades of a famous cricketer turned politician that we know, and all of it, the amalgam is quite worrying actually.
And and he's got Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was actually one of my inspirations. Bill Clinton, Trump, as you say, of the people that you've named, he is an amalgamation of all of those people. So he's kind of a very charismatic alpha male character.
Actually, I find that the satire still exists very much here, and it's just a little subtler. I mean, especially if you look at all the alpha male kind of things that come together in even this character. There's so much rich material in there.
I'm glad you say that, because I wanted people to read it and to think that I've seen this. I know this. I think part of the reason why Butterfly is successful in the subcontinent is because people recognize the truth behind it. When I say something like, the servants' salaries have gone up so much. I just can't afford to pay my driver anymore. It now, yeah. But I was thinking of buying a diamond ring. and the kind of things that we're constantly doing with ourselves. And when you read those things, you click and you recognize them. I hope that it will happen in this book as well, in The Impeccable Integrity of Ruby R. I try and be as truthful as I can, and I try and tell it as it is. And I hope that when people see it, they will recognize it.
So all the best with that, Moni. And I think we have audience questions. I'm going to, make sure that people get to ask.
Yeah, great. There are a couple of questions that have come in on our chat section, so I'm going to read those out. So please feel free to respond, Moni.
With pleasure. With pleasure.
Yeah. How does one resolve the dichotomy of living in the same society, which they are satirical about, without probably not necessarily seeking a change either personally or through their work? This question is from Abhinav Singh.
I think, when you were talking about humor and satire, I think the difference between satire and humor is that satire is always trying to improve. So the reason why you pinpoint particular injustices or particular inequalities is because through your writing is because you would like to see them being improved or changed or removed. And that is what differentiates satire from other forms of humor. As far as the dichotomy of living in a society while also writing about it, is that I try to make people conscious of it. That's all you can do, right? You hold a mirror up to society and hope that people will see themselves in it. And as far as myself is concerned, I have always said that I am butterfly, although people keep saying to me, no, you are just being humble bragging here. It's not true. It is actually, when your first reaction when you think of something and it's a kind of unworthy reaction, and then you think, no, I shouldn't think like that. And you filter your thoughts and you filter what you're saying. And in myself also, I'm constantly trying to make myself aware of all my own contradictions. I try. I fail most of the time, but I try.
Great. Yeah. Milan, did you want to respond as well?
No, I think we should try and get into some more questions if we can. If not, then I have something very fun for Moni at the end.
Okay, great. Then I'll probably take one question and then we'll cover that. Did you have a question? Maybe, yeah, please come up. There is one question. Post the Black Lives Matter movement, are publishers in the West more open to books by authors from the subcontinent? Either of you who want to take it?
Milan?
Moni, you go first.
Okay, so yes, I think they are, but again, as I said, they have their particular priorities. They don't want to publish stuff that they think that won't sell. White publishers have a reader in mind. They think it's a woman who is middle-aged, middle-class, white, and she has very conventional tastes, and that those tastes don't change. And she's only interested in, as I said, deep, dark stories with a message, which explain our societies and our histories and our current day politics to them. And those are the books that they want to see published, the kind of serious big books with, big urgent books, as they call it. And if those come along, yes. And a lot of the time it's also sort of lip service that they pay to these ideas of change. So they might publish one book which is different, but it will be like their token that, yeah, look, we've done this and now you can't accuse us of anything. I haven't yet seen a huge sea change in the way things are published. I haven't yet seen, there was one book which came out last year, I think, or year before last, 2018, called My Sister the Serial Killer. It was a Nigerian book, and it, for the first time ever, I read a book based in Nigeria, in contemporary Africa, which did not try and explain race to white people. Otherwise, we have to explain race or our culture or if it's or Islam, or the caste system, or political inequality. And as I said earlier, white writers are free to write whatever they like. They can write about their next door neighbor, and that's fine, but we can't. So yes, there is a little bit more scope, but it's also, some of it is illusory.
Hi, I wanted to know from you. See, satire is like as you mentioned, an eccentric way of putting reality to the audience, and it also works on knowing some of these references, right? When you're putting across satire, you expect your audience to know some of these references. So do you think at some point, especially when you're writing, do you think that some of these important issues, if you're trying to bring it up, they will get lost just because probably audience would not get the reference, or they would not be able to relate to the content immediately, that they will have to go back and read something and then come back to understand?
Yeah. That's a good question, actually. And I do run that risk. As I said earlier, that Butterfly was conceived as a newspaper column. So the idea behind it was to make it relevant to what was happening every week in Pakistan. And so I used to write about political developments or something social, a big social event that had happened, etc. And people, for example, living in Bangalore might not know it. And so it became, I had to sometimes explain a little bit of what was going on. And so when I began, actually, when we started writing, when we started compiling the book of the columns, Chiki Sarkar, again, my editor at Random House, had the brilliant idea of writing a small little headline of what had happened that week in Pakistan and how it impacted Butterfly's life. So it was, for example, big protest movement takes place in Lahore. The drop heading was Butterfly, roads closed, Butterfly can't get to beautician. So it sort of played on the discrepancy between the difficulty that the country was facing and the privileged life that the Butterfly had. And yes, I do run that risk, and some of it is lost in translation, I'm sure.
Cool. Yeah, and unfortunately, that is all the time we have, Moni and Milan, but this was such a fascinating session. Milan, did you want to wrap it up?
Well, I think that it'd be nice to hear from Butterfly in the end. Tell us what Butterfly would think of banana bread.
देखिए ना, या तो आप बनाना खाएं और या ब्रेड खाएं. वैसे तो मैं कार्ब्स तो मैं खाती नहीं ना, क्योंकि मेरे लिए जरा वो थोड़ा सा फैटी से हो जाता है. वैसे मैं, और शुगर भी मैं थोड़ी टेक करती हूँ, मैं तो कैंड्रिल पे ही ज्यादा जिंदा रहती हूँ, और bananas are very sugary.
And what does Butterfly feel about wearing a marks?
मार्क्स जो है ना, वो तो मैं पहन लेती हूँ कि आजकल थ्रेडिंग वगैरह भी तो नहीं ना होती इजीली. कौन जा सकता है ब्यूटिशियन? तो मास्क पहन के ना जरा थोड़ा सा वो सारा हाइड हो जाता है ना. सो इट्स काइंड ऑफ क्वाइट यूजफुल समटाइम्स आल्सो.
वैसे इकोनॉमी के बारे में कुछ विचार है बटरफ्लाई का?
वो क्या होता है?
I think we'll leave it on this optimistic note.
Great.
Thank you so much, Moni.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.